Okay, folks, welcome back to the Contrarians. Before we get to our secret episode of the day, I want to check in with Martin Popoff here and see how you're doing, what you've been up to.
I'm doing okay, Marco. Been working on the usual, lots of books and stuff. So yeah, just recently, actually earlier this week, we just had out Riff Raff, the top 250 heavy metal songs of the 70s. So this took a big poll. Wrote reviews for each song. There's 45 sleeves, live shots, but yeah, analysis of each song in reverse order. Probably gonna do an 80s and a 90s one. And then right now at the printer I have Black Sabbath, what did I call it? Born Again, Black Sabbath in the 80s and 90s, and this was the first one that came out. This is Sabotage, Black Sabbath in the 70s. This is from a couple months ago. So yeah, in January I'll have the follow-up to this that'll take us up to the 90s. So yeah, just a lot of books out, basically.
Awesome, and those are available at martinpopoff.com?
You betcha.
Cool, right on. So now we're going to get into this week's episode, which focuses on the band King's X. So Martin's got his favorite album right up here.
Yeah. So of course we are the Contrarians. Wrong album, guaranteed every time, or whatever we call it. So basically, this is definitely a Contrarian view, and I've held this view since the moment this album came out. I love King's X. As a bit of a background, of course, this is a band from Houston. They're a trio. Always had the same lineup. Very prolific songwriters. They've put out a lot of albums, but they have so many songs. They're famous for having songs that they haven't put on any albums. So basically, they were on Atlantic. They're famously known, really. It's almost a cliche, but they're famously known as this band that should have been bigger than they were. I mean, just everything sounds like hits. Great singing, great production, everything about them. Very unique sound, but still very accessible. Very, a lot of pop. People call them, the Beatles crossed with Metallica. There's definitely some Black Sabbath in there as well. Kind of like big, doomy, slow things. So basically, as time goes on, so they're on Atlantic. They have some fame with Dogman, Ear Candy. They're still on Atlantic. They get dropped from Atlantic. And Metal Blade, Brian Slagle, good buddy of mine, love the guy. He picks them up. He loves King's X. So, yeah, this album here, Tapehead, 1998, is my favorite King's X album. And it is an odd choice because at this point, they're self-producing. No more Brendan O'Brien, no more Arnold Lanier as on Ear Candy. They produced this themselves. They made it quickly. They wrote most of it pretty much for this album. There's 5 or 6 songs that they didn't, but it's all new material. And what I really like about it is I just love the first suite of songs, like 4 or 5 songs in a row. Groove Machine, Oh No is one of my favorite songs of theirs, period. And they're just great songs towards the end too. But it is a little rawer. It's got some of that big Doug Pinnick, rumbling, grinding bass on it. Big kind of cavernous drum sounds on it. So it is a bit of a weird choice. We've got an album cover here. This is it's got a purple album cover. That's Doug Pinnick all wrapped up in tape. But the purple, we used to joke at the time. Brian Ames, who designed a lot of Metal Blade covers at the same time, used purple a lot for a bunch in a row. So we call this his purple period. So this is one of the purple ones. But yeah, I guess it's probably not the main choice for. But I just love the anger in it. I love the fact that Doug, I believe, sings every song except one on the whole album. I just love Doug's voice. He's got that cool, soulful Jimi Hendrix kind of voice at the same time. So yeah, that's my choice. It is a Contrarian choice. I'm sure it's probably, well, what would you say is the main choice that people would pick for King's X?
Well, you just went over a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to unpack there.
Yeah.
Generally, I think Gretchen Goes to Nebraska and Dogman are kind of, normally when I look at lists that are ranked, and I actually have some statistics from rankings that were voted on by fans, those 2 albums kind of get pop up for number 1 and 2. Yeah. One thing you mentioned, this has been your favorite King's X album since it came out.
Yeah.
So that's 20 years is a long time to like this album for sure.
Yeah, because after this,
20 years.
yeah, I mean after this they have kind of the weird period where they do Welcome Back, Mr. Bulbous, and there's Black Like Sunday, which brings up a lot of old songs re-recorded, and then technically speaking or theoretically speaking, I should quite like a lot Ogre Tones and 15, but I'm not a huge fan of them for some reason. As much as I am as, you know, even the choices, Gretchen, Dogman, all of those, King's X, the self-titled. But yeah, this is just a cool transitional album where I find that it's still very conventional and song based. There's not too much weird on it. There's kind of a throwaway experimental live track at the end, but I don't really count that. But I find the songs that are just, I mean, they are just songs. Even when the verses, if the verses kind of let you down in being atmospheric and maybe a little noisy and dissonant, the chorus usually takes over, and vice versa on this album. But yeah, so why do you think fans, I'll ask you, I mean, I have my own opinion, of course, as well, but why do you think fans are picking Dogman or Gretchen?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, on a couple of lists that were voted on by fans, Tapehead's not even in the top 5. Tapehead on both lists, which are slightly different. Tapehead comes in at number 9 on both lists, so that's almost out of the top 10 of King's X
And it didn't
albums.
chart at all anywhere, right? Those other ones charted. So.
Right. Actually, that's another point I was going to bring up. You mentioned earlier that like King's X was one of those bands that didn't get to that level that they should have gotten. This actually was the first step towards even going the opposite direction, because every album before that album actually charted up until this one, which is kind of a theme with the Contrarians. It always seems to be that album that we're talking about is the one that doesn't chart in the top 200 or whatever. But for me, my personal opinion, not very familiar with Tapehead. I had to go and listen to the album to study for this episode. And to be honest, if I wasn't paying attention, it almost sounded like from one song to the next was almost like the same song to me. Now, I haven't listened to it as much as you've been listening to it for 20 years, and I feel sorry for you for that. But there's a couple songs, I mean, like the song Cupid kind of stands out as one of the songs for me that's just, the lyrics are kind of lame. It's like Cupid shot the wrong guy. I looked up the lyrics. They kind of read like bad poetry if you don't have the music to it. He's
a very simple lyricist. I've noticed that. Another point I wanted to make is I really like the Pound Hound album from the same time, and it's actually the same year, 1998. And I found that kind of interesting because Pound Hound, the first Pound Hound of the two, kind of fits in a suite with this album. I mean, everybody, go listen to the Doug Pinnick solo albums, the Pinnick Gales. Oh boy, I forget the other guy's name. Sorry about that. Starts with M. But the Pound Hound, there's so much solo stuff. There's solo Ty stuff. There's solo Doug stuff. There's so much great music outside of the catalog. But you're right. In this period, and Doug's always been kind of like this, but he will sing words that seem very slow and boring quite often. And this album, you're right. I mean, that is a good point about this album, that the velocities seem kind of the same. It is a little down arranged and down produced against the big ones, which we've got right here. Here are our two choices, right? So we've got Dogman and Gretchen. Gretchen is the second album. And this was kind of the big one. It had the great single. I mean, Dogman is probably my favorite song. That or Oh No on this record I really like. There's one on Pound Hounds called, I think, Friends, which is really cool. Really good. But,
Another thing you mentioned about Dogman was that it was produced by Brendan O'Brien.
Yeah.
So to me, when you listen to Tapehead, it kind of sounds like maybe they're going a little safer with the production. And I know in our conversations in the past, production is a big part for you in picking what album is better. For example, when we talked about Deep Purple, Perfect Strangers is way better produced than Fireball or even In Rock. Right? Yeah. So in this sense, you're picking an album that even is contrarian to what you normally
It's true,
pick.
yeah. But and this has the really cool, thick, expensive sounding production. This is a little safer. The first two are kind of a group together, Out of the Silent Planet and Gretchen. They have a bit of a safer production. It's still cool. But what I like about Tapehead is this big rumbling bass. Like it is Doug kind of moving towards a lot of things he does on the solo albums. And the solo albums can get a little too obscure and atonal for me at times, but I love picking out the little gems. There's some great stuff on them. But yeah, this one, they did self-produce it. It is a little rougher and rawer, but it's not really rough and raw. It's still unique, and you can just hear the separation between them. They're just like the most massive sounding trio. And and they absolutely, they should have been bigger. I mean, I guess their early hit was Music off of Gretchen, right? And Dogman was that time when it's just everything seemed super hopeful for them. They were supposed to be big. They were almost like grunge before grunge in a certain way. They were a little grungy on that album, I suppose, and all the grunge guys liked them. Like the Soundgarden guys thought they were just like geniuses, and they are. I mean, they're just an incredible band that should have been bigger.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because when you're looking at the bands that were around at the time, they kind of just blend in, and they don't really stand out as much.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned about the bass, I think even on Dogman, it's very bassy, and I think they kind of cover that better. Like, what do you think about like bands producing their own albums? Like,
yeah, it's usually probably not a good idea. I mean, what they do like about having producers, it's not. See, there's a difference between producers and engineers. There's certain producers that are producers/engineers, so they're the kind of guys that give guidance and work on sound. And so basically, when you're producing an album yourself as a band, it means you're not getting that conceptual advice from anybody, but you rely on a strong engineer to get the sounds and do all the grunt work, all the technical work and grunt work, right? To mic up the drums and all that sort of stuff, right? So as long as you've got a good engineer, it can turn out good. But the problem is and King's X, I suppose, is a little guilty of this. I wouldn't say they are on this album because I find this album very accessible and good songs. But you know, they definitely got a little out there on Bulbous and Black Like Sunday. A few other things. Midnight, that one in the corner there, Manic Moonlight is another fairly obscure one. But yeah, you know, and I guess also from the Atlantic years, we've got Faith, Hope, Love is a well-loved album.
that's another one that pops up.
Ear Candy, Ear Candy for a while there was my favorite one. It's
Definitely
a little more
cool
melodic.
Cover.
Yeah, there's a record flat sleeve thing from it. The King's X album is very underrated. The King's X album kind of fits in a trio with Gretchen and Out of the Silent Planet. But Tapehead really does stand alone. It's one of those records that it's almost like the song quality is there, but it's a little bit rough and raw and homespun. It definitely does not feel like a super expensive album like these ones.
I think it kind of stands alone for the wrong reason.
Oh,
but
yeah.
but I mean, what do you think about album covers? Because like, do you take that in consideration? It's not something we bring up often on the show.
Yeah,
but
you try not to, right? King's X had great album covers. I mean, they have some really cool stuff. The neat thing about Dogman is it came out with 3 or 4 different colors, like the CMYK, I believe, of the 4-color scheme. So they have a yellow, a magenta, a blue or whatever, a red. So that was kind of cool that they did with that. The Tapehead album cover I'm not too crazy about. It is cool that is Doug wrapped up in tape. But yeah, it was cool when they did the Gretchen and the Out of the Silent Planet. But yeah, it's good looking stuff. I mean, I do try not to take it into account, but you know, when it's funny though, when you do get an album that you kind of don't like very much, if it also has a crappy album cover, and if it's kind of like a cheaply made album, it affects you. Like you think, oh, everything about this is cheap.
Right. I'm going to shoot some stats at you, some reviews. Here's a review. Tapehead was reviewed by AllMusic's Greg Prado.
Oh yeah, I know Greg, buddy of mine, yeah.
Prado stated that Tapehead was not consistently as great as such past classic as Gretchen Goes to Nebraska or Dogman.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite songs off of Tapehead?
Yeah, so Tapehead, again, it's got sort of a uniformity to it that we talked about. But I love Groove Machine. I like it's a big, expansive, wide open sort of song. Over and Over is cool. It's like a big, heavy power ballad with big drums. Oh No, like I say, I just love it. I just think the lyrics are cool. It's Doug in his sort of usual kind of like wounded emotional state, but it's also got kind of like a sort of a big atmospheric Sabbath vibe to it. Cupid, you're right, Cupid's a little funny. Ocean is the one that Ty sings. A Little Bit of Soul is kind of like funky and a little bit commercial. Hate You is cool. Higher Than God's got a great chorus. Happy World is one of the fast songs on it, and World is one that came from they had written a fair bit previous, but yeah, I just think it's just a good collection all the way through, and that, you know, that's another thing. I mean, there are 2 or 3 songs on each album that I really don't like very much. So this is one that I like kind of fairly uniformly.
Right. Nebraska has some great songs on it. I'll Never Be the Same has a super cool coda on it. Pleiades, Out of the Silent Planet. Dogman, like you said, has the song Dogman on it.
Yeah.
Shoes, which is one of the songs that's very bassy, which we kind of talked about already.
Over My Head, it was the big hit. I called it music because it's sometimes called that, right? Music, Over My Head. But yeah, Dogman, Shoes, Pretend. Yeah, Dogman's amazing. It is very cool.
And Black the Sky is a cool song.
Yeah. Cigarettes, the Jimmy cover, Manic Depression at the end. Yeah, both very cool albums, that's for sure.
So since we're talking about songs, UltimateClassicRock.com made a list of the top 10 King's X songs.
Cool.
How many songs from Tapehead do you think are on that list?
Probably not very many. None, maybe.
0, actually.
Okay, yeah.
In fact, it's
actually... Well, that's being on a major label, too, right?
Right?
Atlantic, I mean, they were on a major label for a long time, and kudos to them for, there's a tie-in with Megaforce, of course, as well, but it's pretty cool that they were on a major label for, it looks like, 5-6 albums, right?
Right, but even on that Ultimate Classic Rock list, it's pretty spread out. Like, I think they only have 2 songs from Gretchen Goes to Nebraska and 1 or 2 from Dogman, and they have songs from albums that they put out in the 2000s even, but just Tapehead is totally overlooked on that list. Ranker.com, we already talked about that. There was a list by Ranker.com, which was voted on by the public. Tapehead was at number 9.
Yeah.
HM Magazine. So HM Magazine gave the album a good review, but HM Magazine is known for giving Christian rock bands reviews. So what do you think about that? Because
it's a funny thing, them and the whole Christian rock thing. I mean,
they deny it, right?
Well, yeah. When I used to interview them in the past, it was sort of a topic that was kind of talked about. People did talk about it. They didn't mind talking about it, and then it kind of faded away. And then there was, I think, there's almost like. I mean, I hope I'm not wrong about this, but I believe Doug has had kind of like an atheist awakening. They basically, methodically moved away from that whole thing, and it wasn't even much. There wasn't even much there to begin with. But yeah, they have had that reputation, but people have not talked about King's X as a Christian rock band for 20 years,
right.
15 years or whatever. I hope they keep making music. I believe there's a new King's X album coming. But yeah, they have so much cool solo stuff.
So you say Tapehead is your favorite King's X album. For me, it's my least favorite. For me, it should be called Tape My Ears instead of Tape My Whole Head, Cover My Ears, because I'm kind of tired of listening to this album now. Yeah. But it's always interesting when we do these episodes because then I get to hear new music that I never really gave much attention to before. So do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. Well, okay. I would just like to say that this was one for me that is just like I went with my heart rather than my head, because I can just tell you every time I have a little King's X fest and start playing a bunch of King's X, it seems 2-3 times a year or whatever. Tapehead's the one I just keep playing over and over and over again, right? To quote a King's X song. It's just one that I could just say without not intellectualizing it, because when I do intellectualize it, I start to move over to your position here. I mean, I love these records too, right? But I was basing this more so on it just seems I can't stop playing the damn album. So there's my reason.
Right. Well, I think Martin should start using his head again. And all you folks out there can use your head. Like, subscribe, follow us. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
One day I'll get